This video is on graphing linear inequalities. First, we're going to talk about the steps to follow, then we're going to do an example. We're going to explain some important information along the way. Step 1 to graph linear inequalities is to solve for y. Just like solving or graphing linear equations, we want it to be in slope-intercept form. So we want to be able to isolate the y. Once we have it in slope-intercept form, we want to graph the line with the slope and the y-intercept. We're going to graph linear inequalities the same way we would graph lines. It's the ending that will be slightly different. The next step would be to determine if the line is solid or dotted. So determine if we have a solid or dotted line. This goes with inequalities. We could have an open or closed circle when we are dealing with one variable in our inequalities. X is less than 5 would mean that we would have an open circle and it would be the numbers that are less than 5. When we're graphing linear inequalities is when we have it in two variables, a y and an x. So in this case, it won't just be one open circle, it would be multiple open circles, so we would use dotted lines. Solid would be the equal to aspect, just like if we had a solid circle or a solid dot when we graph on a number line. The next step would be to determine which way to shade. So determine if shaded above or below the line. This goes back to just graphing inequalities. Are we going to shade less than the numbers or greater than the numbers? So will we shade above the line for greater than or below the line for less than? The last thing we need to remember is that the same golden rule applies. If you divide or multiply by a negative, you have to flip the inequality. So as you're solving for y, you have to remember this. If you divide or multiply by a negative, you must flip the inequality. That will change if it's shaded above or below. That's why we have to determine that last. So if it is a solid line, your inequalities will look like this. It's going to be a less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. It'll be solid, a solid line, if you have the equal to aspect. It'll be a dotted line if it's just less than or if it's just greater than. We will shade above the line if you have y is greater than or y is greater than or equal to, because we want the values that are above the line. We'll shade below the line if it has y is less than or y is less than or equal to, because we want the values that are below the line or less than the line. So we're going to do an example over here. First step is to solve for y. The same way we would always solve for y if we were doing linear equations. So our first step, as always, is to isolate the y. SADMET, we're going to add or subtract away. The 3 is multiplied, the 2x is added. So we want to subtract the 2x from both sides. So we'll have negative 3y is less than 12 minus 2x. The next step would be to divide by that negative 3 on everything. Negative 3y divided by negative 3 is y. Because we just divided by that negative 3, we are going to have to flip the inequality. So instead of it saying less than, it'll turn to be greater than. Positive 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. Negative 2x divided by negative 3 is a positive 2/3 x. Now to rewrite this into the correct format, we would have y is greater than, a positive 2/3 x minus 4. This is so we can find our slope-intercept. Now, we need to determine if it's going to be solid or dotted, and if it's going to be shade above or below. So, it is greater than, so it will be just a dotted line. It is greater than, so we will shade above. We can also check to see which coordinate, if 0, 0 will work. So we're going to do that as well. We're going to check a coordinate. So we're going to graph our line like normal. So we're going to go to 0, -4, 1. So we have our x and our y. We're going to count by ones. We go to our first coordinate of 0, -4. We're going to use our slope of 2/3. So we're going to go up 2 and right 3, change in y over change in x, change in y over change in x, positive 2 over positive 3, positive 2 over positive 3. We can also go -2 change in y, and then -3 as a change in x, -2y, -3 change in x, -2, -3. This is now our line. We would want to have it as a dotted line. So as we connect our lines, I will get it to go dotted line. It's going to be our dotted line. And now we want to shade, since it was above, we take a coordinate, or we take our anywhere on our line, and we shade up, above the line. This is telling us that we want to shade this whole section. This entire section gets shaded. To check a coordinate, what I meant by that is if we check 0, 0, Zero, 0 is in the shaded section, so that means it should work. So if I plug 0 in for y, is greater than 2/3 times the x of 0 minus 4. So this says 0 is greater than, that becomes 0 minus 4. 0 is in fact bigger than -4. That is why that coordinate does work. So we shade towards 0, 0.